Sorry, I didn't see you click on there. I was just reading this fascinating 101 things you didn't know about Haywood Nelson. It was amazing. Anyway, this is the Nooner video, and today I'm going to talk about something, but I want to hear from you. Sometimes the Nooners, or most of the time the Nooners, are supposed to be to get the conversation going in the comment section, and I think this is going to be a good one to really pump up that comment section, because I want to know what got you into toy collecting. Or maybe you don't even collect toys, or action figures, I should say. Maybe you just like watching someone talk about them, or I don't do all just toy stuff, so maybe you just like watching me. You can let me know that also. But let's just say you collect action figure, or you're at least a fan of action figures. Why? We're grown up. We're not little kids anymore. Our mommies don't wipe our tushies anymore. Well, some of us. Why do we still like these action figures, or what got you into liking them? I don't know. Maybe I just stopped growing at a certain age. Now, growing up, of course, I had a lot of action figures. Well, I ain't going to say a lot of action figures. I had a lot of Star Wars action figures. I had almost all the playset ships and figures. And then I had a lot of the He-Man stuff, at least the early series. But like I've talked about before, I didn't have G.I. Joe. I didn't have Transformers. I think I had one or two superpowers. I think I just had Superman off the top of my head. Might have had another one. Had some other action figures here or there. I was always that one-track guy. Like, just give me Star Wars. That's all I want. Then I got into He-Man. I was like, I just want He-Man. I mean, this went through my whole life. It's like now I've got a Apple computer, so I got to have an Apple phone. I got an Apple TV. I know. Don't use that. You can leave that out of the comments section. Even video games. Of course, I had Atari, but then my first one that was for me and not my brother, Nintendo. People would say, "Oh, get Sony, get a PlayStation, or get a Sega." I was like, "No, Nintendo." So I got Super Nintendo. I got a Nintendo 64. I got a Nintendo GameCube. I got the Wii. I even got the Wii U. One of the few people that had the Wii U. I even got the whatever one came after that. Now the Wii U, something come after that? Or maybe that's what we're on to now. I don't know. I don't got the latest one, the little handheld one that turns into. I don't have that one. Maybe I should. I just know I'm not going to play. I just don't really play games anymore, so I don't get them. I feel like I have to get them because I've got all the other Nintendos. But we're talking action figures, not Nintendo. I started thinking, where's the first time as an adult or older collector, not counting when I was a kid buying action figures, did I really start getting into action figures? And I was going to say, well, it was probably around 92 when I started getting into the vintage Star Wars stuff, trying to recollect it. But the day when I was working on my other video, the 8 o'clock video from yesterday, if you didn't see the Batman one, that sparked a memory. Yes, I can remember 1989. Now, by this time, I hadn't bought an action figure since I was probably 13, maybe, somewhere around there. So, I hadn't bought them in years. I don't know how old I was in 89. I don't feel like doing the math right now, but it's been at least 4 or 5 years since I bought action figures. By this time, I had grown out of it. But I went to see Batman. Of course, everyone wanted to see Batman. I know there was other movies out that year. I should have been really into Last Crusade. But let's be honest, Batman took everyone's excitement for their year. There were other good movies, but we all fell in love with Batman. And I can actually remember this in my room, thinking, I would like to have a Batman action figure. And I can remember in my head thinking, that'd be cool, like collect action figures. I never at the time heard anyone that collected action figures. I don't know anyone that collected action figures or nothing. And I think this was, there was a boom in the early 90s of adult collectors, or mostly guys in their 20s collecting action figures. And I think it was all in part of that Batman. I think that started a little spark that, and Batman Returns, made Batman cool. And I can remember going to a Walmart that was near my house and looking for Batman figures, and they had Batman, Joker, and Bob the Goon. And I bought all 3 of them. That's right. Me, tight man with the money, bought all 3 of them. But this was, of course, 89 when I didn't have a job. I didn't have any responsibilities, so I could spend money on 3 figures. They were probably $4 a piece. But I remember taking them home, setting them up, and then that kind of sparked something. But I don't think it really started me collecting action figures. It was just like, okay, I got Batman. Batman's cool. And then I remember Terminator 2 came out, and I thought, oh man, I'll get a Terminator figure. And I remember not liking those figures. They were, to me, too kiddie looking or something, or didn't look enough like the movie, so I skipped them. And I think it was a few more years, probably around 92. I started going to this local comic book store. I've talked about it before. I would go in there probably once a week, sometimes more, and I would look at old back issues for the Star Wars Marvel comics. That's right, I love the old Star Wars Marvel comics. And back then, you could get them for about 25 cents, 50 cents, 75 cents. If it was a rare one, you might have to pay about $2 for it. But I remember I had a checklist with me, and I would go through that checklist and probably buy at least 3 or 4 of them I didn't have. I love this time period in my life. You know, I talk a lot about my childhood growing up, how much I loved playing with the toys, but collecting these comics, it was just a lot of fun. I think because I was turning the age where, you know, I was getting out of high school, or just get out of high school. Well, I didn't graduate till 93, but I was close to getting out of high school, and I had my own money. I had my own driver's license. I could go to the comic book store myself, didn't have to rely on someone taking me. And it was just a magical time. And buying these Star Wars comics, man, going home and read them. I love they had a little section in these comic books sometime that were like letters from fans. It was like taking a trip back, and it really connected me to my childhood. And when I was at this comic book store one time, you know, the guy in there started selling vintage Star Wars toys. And he had an X-Wing, some figures, and maybe a TIE Fighter. He didn't have much, but it blew my mind seeing that X-Wing. And it was the first time I really even thought about Star Wars in a long time. And I thought, man, I'm going to have to get that. And he wanted like $20 for it. Yeah. And I remember going to my grandma's house, asking for $20, because this time I didn't have a job, I don't think. You know, hey, give me $20, I'll pay you back or something. And I went and bought that X-Wing. I could not believe it. And I can remember right around the same time I went to the mall. They had a B. Dalton bookstore. I walked in there. They had a Star Wars collector's book. They had Darth Vader on the cover and Star Trek of the Enterprise. A very famous book. But it was Star Trek and Star Wars collectibles. A little price guide. I bought it. It's the first thing I seen in Star Wars in years, so I bought it. And I can remember looking over the list of figures. Well, Anakin Skywalker. They made an Anakin Skywalker. Han and Carbonite, Luke and a Stormtrooper. It just blew my mind seeing these figures that I didn't know about, because I thought I knew about all of them, because I got out around 1984, maybe a little bit before that. So it blew my mind that they had these figures that I didn't know about. And I can remember going back to the comic book store, and I was like, hey, have you seen these other figures and stuff? And he's like, no, those are hard to get. But here I got a few more stuff in. He has a few more figures and everything. I mean, I picked up a few figures, and then I went back home and got on Prodigy. Now, this is before I had American Online. Same thing. They had CompuServe, Prodigy, and American Online. I first got Prodigy. I was on Prodigy. If you don't know, it's the internet before there. There wasn't no websites, but it was internet. You had an interface. You had these little clubs, and I would go to these little yard sale clubs that women would hang out at and be like, I'm looking for little Star Wars toys if you got them. People would send them to me if I just paid the shipping. People would send me Star Wars figures if I just paid the shipping. Can you believe that? Today they see anything Star Wars and they want $1,000 for it. But we also found another message board that was collectors. I couldn't believe it. I was like, hey, I'm not the only one that wants to buy my old toys back. And so I started talking to these other guys, and I went to the comic book store a couple of days later, and he was telling his friend that worked there. They worked together. There's another guy who worked there named Jay, didn't wear socks with his penny loafers. I don't know why. And they were talking about how they just sold some Star Wars stuff. And the guy was like, yeah, I don't know that guy. He don't come in here, but he came in here looking for Star Wars stuff. And they was like, where's he from? They said he's from Florida. He drove about 8 hours to get here just to buy the Star Wars stuff they had. And they were both amazed. I was like, how does this guy know about this little shop in town? You know, they didn't know much about the internet. And that's when I spoke up and said, I told him. I talk about you guys. You know, I told him about the shop I've got in town that has all this stuff. And they was like, the internet? Prodigy? What you talking about, white fool? And then, you know, I started telling them all about it, and I was getting on, I think I was on American Online too at the same time, telling them about the groups and everything. And we started, you know, we had a friendship. I started working there for a couple of years. I would come in, he would get Star Wars collection. I would match up the guns and stuff. I would always be there Thursday morning to get the action figure news digest. So, you know, about the same time I was starting to get figures. People online was starting to get figures. There's starting to be a community of them. And then, I don't know, something happened in the toy community where it wasn't just me and a couple of the small nerds, geeks buying action figures. I mean, you had the Batman animated series that was amazing. Those were great looking figures. You can see why adults, when I say adults, I mean young 20-year-olds, wanted those. You had a lot of Toy Biz coming out with the X-Men and X-Force and a lot of good figures there. So it just started to snowball. I was like, man, I was getting collectors magazines. I was getting Toy Shop. There was like a big magazine, like a newspaper that had ads in it. I was getting the vintage stuff. You know, Batman I still had in my house, but then you had the Dark Knight collection. I didn't really get into those much. The Batman Returns, I didn't really get into them as much, but X-Men, I would pick up some figures. I didn't even know who they were because they thought they looked cool. Then I got a job at Toys R Us. Woo! And you know I was buying everything I could. You know, I was loading up on that Iceman. I've told y'all about that before. And that kind of snowballed my collection to getting into collection. And of course, 95 came. The new Star Wars figures came out. And about this time, Playmates released Star Trek. And I can remember saying, I'm just going to get a Borg. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to get a Borg. And I'm just going to get Q. That's the only one I care about. And then I was like, well, I got to get the Crew. And then I got the Crew. And then I was like, and the next thing I know, I was hunting down, going Walmart after Walmart, trying to find Wesley Crusher. And then you had the Shadows of the Empire. And then the 90s. The 90s were a great time for action figures. I mean, they were just rolling in. But that's about how I got it started on this whole action figure thing. Now today, of course, I don't buy as much now. Today it's more like if I walk into a store and it's not overpriced, or I feel it's overpriced, and I'm like, hey, that's kind of cool, I'll pick that up. A lot of times I say, well, I'd rather buy something old, something, you know, something from the 80s, something I grew up on. Always a lot more fun, to me anyway. And the new stuff usually just ends up in a drawer in my closet. Hell, sometimes it stays in the Walmart bag in my car for a month. Whew. Is Russ watching this? He knows what I'm talking about. Russ can buy something and I'll see it in his car 6 months later. It's like, Russ, you ain't take it out of the bag. You didn't even take it out of the bag. What's going on there? But that started my love for action figures. Those action figure news, Toy Digest. You know how I feel about Toy Fair. You've heard me talk about that. But it was just a great time to really get into collecting, and it started a whole new industry, I guess, for collecting. It's just weird how right around that same time, 89 to about 93, there was really a boom in the adult collectors market. That wasn't there before. It was us Gen Xers becoming 20-year-old with spare money. And I guess movies like Batman, that probably really helped more than anything. Batman, then in the late 90s, you know, you had X-Men that helped, and Spider-Man. But in the 90s, Batman was the one that really, I think, pushed a lot of people back into that geek culture that may have stepped away from it. And then you had great cartoons like the Batman cartoon. You had some X-Men cartoons. You had a lot of Ninja Turtles, I think, helped out a lot also. That was more like the cartoon was, kids could watch it, but a lot of older kids liked it also. Okay, I'm just starting to ramble, but I want to hear from you guys. What was it? What was it that got you into collecting action figures? Do you remember? Or are you just like, I never got out of it? Maybe you never even got out of collecting them. Anyway, let me know what you think of that. And I'm going to go now because I just found this other website I was going to check out before you guys came in. Can you believe this? It's 501 facts you didn't know about the new Zoo Review. I cannot wait to see what this one is. Okay, let me see this. Thanks for watching, guys. Thumbs up, like my content, subscribe to the channel. We'll talk again soon. I remember that owl.
Hey, Junkman channel popping though.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.